Who is the most overrated person in history? My sister. I do stuff too. Mom. Tutankhamun. Or King Tut as he is sometimes referred. He was a boy pharaoh that only reached the age of maybe 18. Born from incest and suffered scoliosis, a bad foot, walked with a cane, and contracted malaria. And likely died from an infection from a broken leg. Also, when he came to power, married his sister and had 2 miscarriages. This poor boy had lots of power, but was sick all his life, and likely his advisors made all decisions for him and eventually succeeded him. Also had a very short reign that ended with Egypt at war. They would lose under his successor. Guy Fawkes. He was a minor cog in a conspiracy that he didn't even know all that much about. He was tasked with a dead simple objective. And he failed. He gave up the names of all the co-conspirators that he knew about. But most of them operated on a much higher level than this chump. So they got off Mosul T scot-free. He had 1 job and he fucked up 3. Basically, he doesn't deserve the pages that his story is written on in history books. Jack the Ripper. More overhyped, not overrated. But he only killed 5 people. It's not like he's the original Dexter. Beyoncé. Her host, the wife of the owner of the Warriors, leans over her to ask Jays what he wants to drink. People see it, harass the woman to no end, and make it into a power moment for Beyoncé. Don't get me wrong, she's a great artist, but people act like she's a god. Edit. To everyone saying, it's not her. It's her fanbase. Would you kindly look up the definition of overrated? Coco Chanel. I have recently found out she was apparently a Nazi agent who went under the codename Westminster. She spent most of WW2 in Paris in the Ritz sleeping with Nazi officers and had direct contact to Himmler and Goebbels. She even insisted all Jewish directors of her brand be removed. Edit. I can't spell. Ted Bundy. People claim that in terms of serial killers he had high intelligence. He didn't. He dropped out of law school because he couldn't keep up with his peers. So he was of average intelligence. He's just being compared with other serial killers who overall skew lower in terms of IQ. And no, his crimes weren't clever. He broke into the basement of a sorority house and bludgeoned 2 girls to death with a log from the fireplace while they were sleeping. The only reason he wasn't caught sooner was because the detectives working on the case were idiots and ignored multiple credible reports from Bundy's ex-wife. Stop romanticizing the guy. Outside of how nasty it is to hype up freaking serial killers, he, like all serial killers, was a gigantic turd sandwich. He wasn't smart. And his crimes weren't elegant or super planned out 4D chess murders. Don't believe the stupid dumb Netflix movie. Oh, and he admitted that after he tossed the bodies into a field because they were too badly decomposed to keep them in his house. He'd still go out there and sleep with them despite the fact that they were rotting and likely full of maggots and etc. Dude was sick. People need to stop romanticizing crime. Edit. For people picking apart the law school comment. What I said came directly from Ted Bundy's mouth in terms of the reason he dropped out. In August 1974, Bundy received a second acceptance from the University of Utah Law School and moved to Salt Lake City, leaving Klopfer in Seattle. While he called Klopfer often, he dated at least a dozen other women. 110, when he studied the first-year law curriculum a second time. He was devastated to find out that the other students had some intellectual capacity that he did not. He found the classes completely incomprehensible. It was a great disappointment to me. He said. This came from Polly Nelson's book. And she was one of his lawyers. So if you have issues with my comment about him not keeping up with his peers, that comes straight from Ted himself. Double edit. To whomever gave me silver. Thank you. Usually I respond to the gilding message with a thank you, but I got up to clean my fish tank and came back to like 60 comments. So I got a little overwhelmed. Christopher Columbus. Edit. I'd like to thank the Academy for silver. Mother Teresa. Mia Khalifa. Mother Teresa. I think the world is being much helped by the suffering of the poor people. Mother Teresa. She earned billions and flew around in private jets. All the while, torturing ill or dying patients. She called her medical facilities houses of the dying, and they were exactly that. She didn't isolate patients with highly infectious diseases. She basically glorified her patients' suffering instead of treating it. Withholding painkillers. So patients were left in agony. Used syringes were rinsed with water and reused. This was in 1991, for fuck's sake. And the Catholic Church made her a fucking saint. It's disgusting. Edit. The source for my assumption that she earned billions is here. This was an assumption in a comment that should have only contained hard facts. So apologies for that. Waldo. Why should anyone even care to search for him? He's done nothing. The fact that he's always hiding is probably because he's done something wrong. Plus that fucker only has one shirt. This whole thread can be summarized as surprise ending. Nobody is perfect. Mother Teresa believed the suffering of the poor was beautiful. Ioannis Metaxas. He was the leader of Greece from 1936 to 1941. Most famous for not surrendering to fascist Italy during WW2. The only problem is that Metaxas was a fascist dictator himself. I'm gonna have to go with Hitler. His paintings really weren't that great. Not the most overrated, but first guy that comes to mind is America's only Paul Revere. Don't get me wrong. Yes, he was a good guy and he played a role in our nation's fate that night. But did you know he wasn't the only man on the midnight ride? A lot of the work and credit goes to his two peers that night. Revere only gets the credit because his name rhymed nicely in the poem written about him. I only know this because my grandma pointed out that we're related to one of the other two men. William Dawes. I'm too lazy to look up the other guy's name or how much of a role each of the three played in the event. But my basic memory tells me Revere wasn't the most critical player of the three. In fact, and I could be wrong, he got caught before he finished his role, which led the real heroism to one of the other two. So yeah, thanks Paul Revere. But let's give credit to the other guys who warned us of the British that night. We can't all have nice-sounding names, though, so your name is remembered while the other two have been forgotten by most. Other than historians and nerds. ETA. I didn't expect this to be seen or for it to get all this attention. Not replying to everyone, but there's some good history facts in here and I'm learning some things about him and others. Us history, especially with regards to war, isn't my top interest. I'm liking the conversation and seeing some healthy debate. Sorry if I sounded undereducated on this topic as I don't know it in great detail. This is Reddit. This is my opinion. And that was mostly detail from what I learned in K-12 school, but I'm done with my bachelor's now and K-12 was a long time ago. Also, this may be my top comment ever, so thank you everyone for the karma. But mostly the interesting facts and conversation here. I just had 100+ notifications in my inbox yesterday and thought I marked them all as read, so I was really confused seeing all of this. 2 comments in 2 days hitting 6K plus karma. I just had a crummy night at the laundromat, so thank you for making that a little bit better. Lajos fucking Kossuth. He's a Hungarian history figure who lived 1802 to 1894. But most notably he declared himself as governor-president of the Kingdom of Hungary during the 1848–49 revolution. For those of you who are not really familiar with Hungarian history, the short variant is, we were fucked by everyone and never had independence since the early 1300s. This time we had beef with the Habsburgs. We really wanted independence. Have Hungarian as the official language and the liberation of the serfdom. Sounds cool. Before the revolution, the 2 most outstanding political figures were Kossuth and Count István Széchenyi. He's actually a really cool dude. And I think he deserved the title the greatest Hungarian. They both wanted the same things, but Kossuth wanted everything ASAP, while Széchenyi understood that change takes time. So of course they didn't like each other. With some other factors, Kossuth ended up bullying Széchenyi out of politics. I give Kossuth the credit for being smart and charismatic, who could motivate people with his speeches. So one time he basically started a rally amongst common folk, because other politicians told him that discrowning the king was a bad effing idea. But because of the massive amount of people surrounding them, they couldn't really say no. So they did discrown the king. During the revolution we sucked ass. Not getting into details. We had more downs than ups. Also some minorities revolted against Kossuth, who would not give them any rights. Enter one of my favorite historical figure, Artur Görgey. He was the greatest general in this whole scene. And finally he has his own exhibition. He actually won against some Austrian army corps. Kossuth hated him most likely because he feared his power and did everything to remove him from charge. But the Austrian king, Ferdinand V, asked the Russian Emperor, Nicholas I, for help. So, Hungary is a small country with a small population. Russia on the other hand. You see where this is going. Gorgey wanted to go west and destroy the Austrian army before the Russians arrive. Otherwise we're fucked. Sounds great. Not for Kossuth. He wanted to wait until the two armies merge in the east because if they lose, he can emigrate to Turkey. The latter happened. And Kossuth, as his last fucking move, stepped back from being governor-president and appointed Gorgey. A few days later, on August 13, it was clear that Hungary had lost. In a hopeless situation, Gorgey signed a surrender at Vilagos. Kossuth emigrated to Turkey, but tried to control everything from afar, writing the Cassandra letter, that if we make peace with the Austrians, Hungary will no longer exist. Which was bullshit. Our industry and agriculture fucking blossomed after. As a really great university professor once said, Kossuth threw a big rock up in the air and pushed Gorgey under it. Basically he threw him under the bus. What baffles me about this absolutely garbage of a person? That he has the biggest mausoleum in all of Hungary. It's made out of gold, marble and all that jazz. You know what Gorgey has? A black iron cross. God, I hate him so much. BTW, he died in Italy. And he still has a huge following because he was so great that every fucking town has to have at least one road named after him. Edit. Thank you for the silver kind stranger. Edit 2. Change the swear words. Edit 3. Thank you for all the response I got. I didn't expect it to blow up. Thank you for the gold. Platinum. Everything. TLDR. Lajos Kossuth is a charismatic politician. Becomes governor-president of Hungary during a revolution. His plan fucks the whole nation. Leaves everyone to deal with what he caused by running away to Turkey. Acted like a know-it-all until he died. Now has a huge following as the nation's hero, but he's basically an asshole. Thomas Edison. Let's be real here. Who isn't overrated? Remember, sort by controversial for the real answers. Edit. Since a lot of people are commenting this, it wasn't just Keanu, Obama, Trump, and Jesus when I originally made the comment, but they were there. Edit. Coincidentally, I think those are also the answer to who do you think will make an appearance in the next Bill and Ted movie? John Lennon. Don't hurt me. I'm a big Beatles fan. But somebody had to say it. Ronald Reagan. He was always a popular president. But he has since been recast, mainly by conservative historians, as a great one as well. Yes, you can easily place him on that pedestal. You would merely need to ignore the Iran-Contra scandal, the huge budget deficits, his environment ignorance, his do-nothing reaction to the looming AIDS epidemic, his courting of Saddam Hussein, and numerous other blunders. And he didn't win the Cold War. The war in Afghanistan started in 1979. Reagan was still in California. Erwin Schrödinger. He is both overrated and underrated simultaneously. Mao. Stalin. Literally a mass murder. Still hailed to this day by a majority of Russians and many other dumbass communists around the world. Henry VIII. Let's be honest. All he did was strong-arm the church so he could marry another woman, the fat greedy sod. Steve Jobs. Garfield. We all hate Mondays. You ain't special. Kim Kardashian. Douglas MacArthur. Was obsessed with his legacy while being a far less capable leader than many of the other overlooked commanders in the Pacific Theater. He spent thousands of lives in battles on islands that had little strategic significance. Declared the battle for the Philippines over while intense fighting raged on. And was disliked by many serving under him. Go listen to, read Max Hastings' Retribution. The Battle for Japan for a great deep dive into the Pacific War. Edit. Added over. XXXTentacion. Che Guevara. Horrible person that somehow became a symbol of rebellion and freedom. Woodrow Wilson. Gandhi. Amelia Earhart. There were plenty of trailblazing and better women pilots, yet Amelia is a household name because she attempted something she died while trying. Keanu Reeves. Like, yeah, he's a nice guy and all. But Reddit is just absolutely obsessing over him. Hillary Clinton. Now before you go all nuts on me, hear me out. Never before has a feminist ridden the coattails of their husband the way Hillary Clinton has. She moved from Arkansas to D.C. Then to NY and 6 months later was a senator from there? Come on. She was horrific to Barack in the primaries in 2008. Why he gave her a job? I'll never know, and was entitled to the nomination in 2016. Hillary is no dummy. But if not for Bill? She would be a real estate attorney back in Little Rock. Elon Musk. J. F. Kennedy. He is considered to be one of the best presidents. But during his presidency he didn't accomplish a lot. Maybe. That's because his term was relatively short. But anyway, he is in the history mainly because of his death. Edit. JFK wasn't bad per se. He did some controversial stuff and did something good. But he wasn't most productive president in history, and this topic isn't about being good or bad. It's about being overrated. Cardi B. Barack Obama. He received a Nobel Prize and is widely respected and admired. But if you really look at what he accomplished, it's pretty lackluster. Henry Ford. In business, engineering, and manufacturing, he's revered like a god. Professors like to gloss over his overwhelming anti-Semitism. Ford wrote and published a wildly anti-Semitic newspaper, which were spread around the Ford Motors facilities. Those papers were republished in Germany and became incredibly popular with the Third Reich. Heinrich Himmler described Ford as one of our most valuable, important, and witty fighters. Hitler praised Ford in Mein Kampf and referred to Ford as an inspiration. The admiration went both ways. Because Ford was a Nazi sympathizer to the highest degree, hosting Hitler's representatives in his home and hobnobbing with Nazi officers. On his 75th birthday, he was awarded the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest medal Nazi Germany could bestow on an American. But all anyone cares about are his effing assembly lines, which he didn't even invent. The assembly line idea actually came from Ransom E. Olds. Bill Clinton. Turns out he was just 15 years early enough to avoid the Me Too movement. Also, a lot of the laws and executive order he signed led to the 2007 collapse, and he is primarily to blame for the high minority incarceration rate. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.